Good. All right, so that was President Trump meeting the Amir of the state of Qatar. You are watching Fox 10 News Now, part of fox10phoenix.com. Just a reminder, we will be having a very special stream today here on News Now. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook CEO, will be testifying in front of Congress today for the Senate committee. We'll have that for you at 2 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be on a special event stream. We already have that ready. You're watching News Now.
So I hope we can work across the aisle with every level of government and private industry to continue the good work that we've set in place. If we follow the law, pursue goals achievable with modern technology and control methods, and collaborate, we can continue to grow the economy while reducing emissions. We must also never lose sight of the fact that the American dream of economic prosperity is what provided our citizenry with 2 centuries of continuous advancements in health and development, and which itself has enabled our modern focus on environmental improvement. Far from zero-sum, economic and environmental benefits track together. I look forward to hearing from our state experts from across the country about their ideas on how to continue this cycle based on their experiences engaging with the EPA. I would now recognize Ranking Member Whitehouse for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Senator Capito. I welcome the witnesses who are here today. We're here to talk about cooperative federalism, 2 words which have become something of a mantra for EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt. They're among his most trusted talking points, right up there with another favorite catchphrase, back to basics. So what does cooperative federalism really mean? And particularly, what does it mean to Administrator Pruitt? Cooperative federalism should mean that EPA and the states work together to reduce pollution. Reducing pollution involves doing scientific analysis, gathering data, writing rules, setting targets, and enforcing the rules and targets. This work can and should be done together by EPA and the states. It used to be. But that's not what Scott Pruitt means by cooperative federalism. To Pruitt, cooperative federalism means having EPA do less to reduce pollution and hand over more of the work to the states, all while proposing fewer financial resources to the states to do this work. And if some states are less interested in reducing pollution or don't have the resources to develop and enforce rules limiting pollution, then so much the better. Because, you see, that is Pruitt's goal here. Cooperative federalism is code for EPA and some states walking away from their core mission of protecting human health and the environment. The proof is that any time a state takes strong action to reduce pollution, Pruitt's EPA either opposes the initiative or slow walks it. Pruitt's version of cooperative federalism is a one-way street towards more pollution. States are encouraged to take the lead in reducing pollution so long as they don't actually try to reduce pollution. Pruitt's recent decision to water down corporate average fuel economy standards, the CAFE standards, is an example of how cooperative federalism under Pruitt really works. These CAFE standards were negotiated in 2012 by EPA, California, and the auto industry, all parties agreed to these standards, which are estimated to save consumers $1.7 trillion at the pump. That's an average of $8,000 over the life of a car purchased in 2025. And, of course, to reduce carbon emissions by 6 billion metric tons. So why did Pruitt decide to roll back those agreed-to CAFE standards? Not because California asked him to, but because industry did. Is it cooperative federalism to ignore the states and do industry's bidding? When you get beyond the rhetoric, Pruitt isn't really interested in cooperating with states. His real interest is in cooperating with corporations, which have bankrolled his entire political career. You might actually call it cooperative corporatism. And now that California and Rhode Island and Delaware and many of the other 10 states and the District of Columbia that follow California emission standards have objected to his decision to water down the CAFE standards, Pruitt has suggested that he may revoke the waiver granted to California under the Clean Air Act that allows it to set its own emission standards. How's that for cooperation?
It's horrible.
And Pruitt's desire to centralize decision-making in his own hands isn't just limited to the Clean Air Act. He recently announced that all decisions relating to determining whether a project has a significant environmental impact on waterways will be made by him. So much for local control and cooperative federalism. My home state of Rhode Island has a long coastline that is particularly vulnerable to sea level rise. The CAFE standards represent an important part of our efforts to combat climate change, which is responsible for sea level rise. The Clean Power Plan is also critical to reducing the carbon emissions driving climate change. But Pruitt is trying to repeal that too. Do you think he consulted with Rhode Island officials or the officials in any coastal states on repealing the Clean Power Plan? If you need any further proof that Scott Pruitt's cooperative federalism is a one-way street sham, just look at his proposed budget for FY19. He proposes cutting grants to the states for clean air programs by over $160 million. Some programs he eliminates entirely. Rhode Island's Department of Environmental Management receives about $10 million a year in grants from EPA. About $2.4 million of this goes to clean air programs. How does Pruitt expect states to step up and lead on protecting clean air when he tries to cut the money they receive to do this work? The answer is he doesn't. Scott Pruitt's mission at EPA is cooperative corporatism, to serve the interests of the industry that has always backed him. You see this in decision after decision, where state input is ignored, and you see this in industry cronies installed at EPA. Scott Pruitt has sullied the doctrine of cooperative federalism, just as his disregard for EPA's mission has sullied the agency, and his actions stand to sully our environment. I salute states like Rhode Island, California, and Delaware that are working so hard to protect our environment, but we do it better with an effective partner in EPA. It is time for EPA to get serious about protecting the environment and public health. That, after all, is its true mission. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. To begin our introductions, Chairman Barrasso is here. I would like to ask if you would like to introduce our witness from Wyoming.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I would, and I'm so pleased to introduce Nancy Veer, who serves as the Air Quality Administrator for the Wyoming Department of Air Quality. Administrator Veer has led Wyoming's efforts to improve air quality and implement the Clean Air Act since 2015. Before serving as Air Quality Administrator, she worked at the Wyoming Attorney General's office, and in that office, she served as the Assistant Attorney General and represented the state's Division of Air Quality. Administrator Veer has also had broad experience in the private sector, where she handled a wide variety of civil and environmental matters. Her wealth of experience with the Clean Air Act and her deep familiarity of Wyoming has served the state very well, for which we're very grateful. Due to our unique location, geography, and natural resources, Wyoming needs flexibility to implement the Clean Air Act. So I look forward to hearing your testimony today and listen as you explain the challenges faced by the state of Wyoming in implementing the Clean Air Act and how the EPA can better partner with states, and specifically the state of Wyoming, to solve these challenges. So welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your willingness to testify. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Now I'd like to recognize our ranking member, Senator Carper, if he would like to make an introduction.
I would. Thank you, Madam Chair. We're welcoming back, it's like welcome back Qatar. This guy's welcome back Sean to the Environment and Public Works Committee. And we're happy you could join us. Sean and I spent some time trying to get here this morning on a train that just was not really cooperative. But thank you for sticking with it and for making it down here. Sean, did you ever work for Joe Biden? How long? 2 years. 2 years. Would you say the happiest 2 years of your life?
I think the 20 years I've been married to my wife.
All right. Good man.
Oh, that's right. You mean the mother of your son? The mother of your son? What, was Dylan, right? Is he in high school? Was he college? Okay. All right. Going to college soon? Soon. Okay. So you worked for Joe Biden, kept him out of trouble for at least 2 years. And ended up for your efforts, EPA Region Administrator, Region 3, for what, 8 years? Was it 8 years? Yeah, 8 years. And after that, you ended up as the Secretary to the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. Is anybody in this room who also held that position previously? Who would that be? Christophe Toulouse. He was the Secretary for my 8 years as governor. So we've known Sean for a long time, admire him, feel great affection for him and his family, and happy that you would be with us today. Thank you for your continued service, not just to the people of Delaware, but to the people of our country. Give your family our best. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Senator Carper. And I will introduce the rest of the witness panel, and then we'll begin. In addition to Ms. Vare and Mr. Garvin, we have Mr. Sean Altieri, who serves as the Director of the Division for Air Quality in the Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet's Department of Environmental Protection. That's a long title. Mr. Altieri has previously served as the president of the Association of Air Pollution Control Agencies and continues to play a leadership role in that organization. Welcome. We have Mr. Toby Baker, who is a commissioner of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, first nominated by then Governor Rick Perry in 2012. Welcome. We also have Mr. Matthew Rodriguez, who serves as California's Secretary for Environmental Protection. I want to thank all of the witnesses for being here, and I will now recognize our witnesses for their opening statements. As a reminder, your full written testimony has been submitted for the hearing record. So, Ms. Vare, would you recognize you for 5 minutes?
Madam Chair, could I ask you unanimous consent today the statement of mine be inserted in the appropriate place in the hearing? Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Wood. I check, make sure your mic's on.
Oh, thank you.
That's much better. Yep. You don't want to miss a word.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, and members of the subcommittee. I have the honor and pleasure of serving the great state of Wyoming as the administrator for the Air Quality Division. Our department is an active member on the Environmental Council of States, ECOS, with several of the other presenters also serving on that. Our division is a member of the Association of Air Pollution Control Agencies, where I serve as vice president, and the Western States Air Resource Council, WESTAR, where I also serve as vice president. While my testimony may reference those organizations, I am not here to testify on their behalf. In order to put my remarks in context, I'd like to share a few facts about Wyoming to help you get to know who we are. Wyoming has been blessed with amazing and abundant natural resources. We are home to Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks and other special and scenic places that some of you may have visited. Our abundant mineral resources provide the nation, our state, and our citizens with revenue and jobs. Our leading industries are energy, tourism, and agriculture. We are the 9th largest state, roughly 93 times the size of Rhode Island. Our largest county is roughly 4 times as large as Delaware. About half the land in Wyoming is owned and managed by the federal government. We are also the least populous state, not quite 600,000 of us, in small rural communities or in the large expanses in between. Only 9 communities in Wyoming have more than 10,000 people each. Wyoming wants and is working towards improved relationships and interactions with EPA. It is Wyoming's experience that EPA shares this desire and is doing the same. Why are improvements to cooperative federalism so important? Because we want better outcomes and air quality improvements. My testimony highlights some of the progress that has been made in the recalibration of state and federal rules, which leads to more effective air quality environmental management at lower cost. My written testimony highlights some of these examples. My remarks today touch on one, regional haze. With respect to cooperative federalism, EPA sets the deadlines and standards. States develop plans with implementation strategies to meet those deadlines and standards. When that process works, the result is improved air quality at lower cost. Wyoming treasures her magnificent resources and vistas. In the 1977 Clean Air Act amendments, Congress established a goal to restore visibility in national parks and wilderness areas to natural conditions. Some 20 years later, EPA adopted the Regional Haze Rule. The rule mandates that states submit plans to reduce regional haze emissions. However, right in the midst of the regional haze plan submittal and approval timeframes, the cooperative federalism process failed. Instead of approving innovative state plans to improve air quality, EPA oftentimes failed to act or imposed a one-size-fits-all federal plan on a state. Wyoming is one of those states in which EPA imposed a regional haze federal plan that came with a much higher price tag and no added visibility benefit as compared to the state's plan. The work involved to develop and submit a state plan is time-consuming and costly. For regional haze, the process in this first round took more than a decade and cost the state hundreds of thousands of dollars on the technical work alone. Wyoming's plan achieved significant emission reductions, including almost 10,000 tons of nitrogen oxides, by installing $100 million worth of pollution controls. Wyoming's plan demonstrated that Wyoming would be on track to meet its visibility improvement progress goals. Instead of approving Wyoming's plan, EPA imposed its own federal plan. EPA's plan had a price tag of $600 million, but did not meaningfully improve visibility. These issues are now tied up in litigation. The challenge is that the second round of regional haze plans are due in a few years. Federal and state collaboration is underway in that process. Wyoming remains hopeful that those collaborative efforts will continue and be fully implemented. If so, the result will be continued improvement and progress towards meeting the Clean Air Act visibility goals at a cost and resource savings to Wyoming citizens. Thank you to the committee for inviting Wyoming and listening to the department's perspective on cooperative federalism under the Clean Air Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Altieri.
Good morning, Chair Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Sean Altieri, and I currently serve as the Director of the Kentucky Division for Air Quality. I'm honored to testify today, and I thank you for this opportunity to share a state's perspective related to cooperative federalism under the Clean Air Act. In addition to my work with the Kentucky Division for Air Quality, I also serve as the past president of the Association of Air Pollution Control Agencies. Our association is a national, nonpartisan, consensus-driven organization focused on improving air quality. The association represents more than 45 state and local air agencies. As Senator Inhofe remarked during a 2016 hearing, cooperative federalism is a core principle of environmental statutes, including the Clean Air Act, where EPA and states work together to meet environmental goals. Obviously, mutual respect is essential and necessary to forge a strong working relationship between EPA and state regulators. Working together cooperatively will allow all of us to achieve our environmental goals and objectives. Specific to the Clean Air Act, cooperative federalism is more than just a catchphrase. Once EPA establishes a standard or an applicable requirement under Title I of the Act, the states are primarily responsible for implementation and enforcement of those standards and requirements. These standards include the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, the Standards of Performance, the National Emission Standards for Hazardous Air Pollutants, and waste incineration rules. To ensure that states are provided with the ability to carry out its obligations under the Clean Air Act and effectively administer its delegated authorities, EPA must establish nationally uniform emission standards based on sound science. Additionally, EPA must promulgate reasonable regulations and fully consider implementation requirements of state, tribal, and local air pollution control agencies. Importantly, EPA must allocate stable and adequate resources and funds to state, tribal, and local air pollution control agencies. Also, EPA must provide timely implementation guidance and technical support. And finally, EPA must meet all of its non-discretionary statutory duties by the prescribed deadlines. EPA's strategic plan for fiscal year 18 through 2022 underscores each of these necessities. In its strategic plan, EPA establishes a goal of cooperative federalism and sets forth its objectives to enhance shared accountability and to increase transparency in public participation. EPA's goal and objectives are consistent with those of state, tribal, and local air pollution control agencies. In Kentucky, we take our responsibilities seriously and work diligently to fulfill our obligations under the Act. We are proud of the significant improvement in air quality, and we understand that there is more work to conduct. In the spirit of cooperative federalism, I'd like to provide a status report on air quality in Kentucky and to detail activities conducted by our cabinet to fulfill our obligations. Air quality in Kentucky has improved dramatically. In the last 10 years, emissions of sulfur dioxides from our electric generating units has decreased by more than 83%, and emissions of nitrogen oxides have decreased by more than 70%. Our robust ambient air monitoring network measures these positive results. Currently, all of the monitors in the Commonwealth, except for one ozone monitor in Louisville, measure compliance with all of the national ambient air quality standards, including the 2015 ozone standard. These reductions in our success in air quality improvement are achieved through significant investments to install and upgrade air pollution controls. In the last 10 years, our utilities invested more than $8 billion, with a B, dollars for air pollution controls, and these expenditures are shared by all of the ratepayers in the Commonwealth. Despite these efforts, EPA during the last administration disapproved several state implementation plan revisions and issued federal implementation plans as a result. EPA's negative actions to disapprove or issue a federal implementation plan resulted from sue and settled decisions. In closing, the Commonwealth of Kentucky is meeting its statutory obligations under the Clean Air Act, and we are good neighbors by reducing our emissions and providing the rest of the country with all the manufactured goods and products necessary to improve the quality of life for all. To accommodate cooperative federalism and strong working relationships, we request that EPA apply a state implementation approach rather than aggressive federal overreach. Again, thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to any questions or comments you may have regarding my testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Baker.
Thank you, Chairman Capito and Ranking Member Whitehouse and members of the Environment and Public Works Subcommittee. For the record, my name is Toby Baker. I'm a commissioner of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, otherwise known as the TCEQ. The TCEQ is the third largest environmental regulatory agency in the United States behind the EPA in California, if you count their air control district model as one agency. We have close to 3,000 employees across 16 regional offices, with our largest regional office being located in Houston, as you may have guessed. By authority delegated to our agency, we regulate water quality, air quality, and waste in Texas. I'd like to highlight a few facts about Texas I believe were made possible through the tradition of cooperative federalism that, as you know, was built into the Federal Clean Air Act and a number of other federal regulatory statutes. Starting with the amendments to the Clean Air Act in the early 90s, Texas, one of the largest coastal states, turned a corner in environmental regulation, has become one of the leading states in environmental success relative to our environmental challenges. We currently produce 1/3 of the nation's crude oil, 30% of all refining capacity is located within our borders, and 1/4 of all U.S. natural gas production comes from Texas. Balancing this, we also are the largest wind-producing state in the U.S. with over 20,000 megawatts of capacity. Solar energy production is ramping up, and if you consider the projects we have in queue, we should have close to 3,500 megawatts of utility-scale solar constructed or being built by 2019. To sum up, we produce and consume more energy than any other state. In addition, the population of Texas is increasing rapidly. Since 2000, it is estimated that our population has grown by over 8 million. It's no secret that Texas is hot, and these 8 million newcomers to the state have no doubt discovered the benefits of air conditioning, which requires a significant amount of power. It's also no secret that Texans like their cars, and 8 million new Texans moving primarily to already heavily populated areas adds a number of new vehicles to our transportation system. One could assume an increase in population coupled with our robust manufacturing sector would lead to increased emissions, but in reality, the opposite has occurred. Since the late 90s, we've seen a dramatic drop in both NOx emissions and ozone emissions. While we have occasional bouts with other criteria pollutants, ozone is our most pressing. Since 2000, we have been one of the top states in reducing ozone emissions. In fact, in the latest ranking of the dirtiest cities by the American Lung Association, Texas does not have a city in the top 10, while having 3 of the top 10 largest cities in the U.S. Given the fact that the Houston area is essentially the kitchen for a good portion of the U.S., and that it has prime ozone-making weather, it's frankly astounding. Our emissions in our major metropolitan areas are currently driven more by mobile sources than any point source. CO2 is worth mentioning here as well. While Texas produces more CO2 than any other state, the per capita production, according to EIA, puts us at number 14 when ranking the states. If we're objective about it, I would argue that's a model for efficiency. So what's led to this success? I'd say a tradition of cooperative federalism that's allowed Texas to tailor its own unique solutions to our own unique problems, a market that has led to maximizing efficiency in the refining sector and power sectors, 3, cleaner burning vehicles, and finally, incentives. So I'd like to address cooperative federalism a little more specifically. First and foremost, the benefits of cooperative federalism done correctly were on full display during our response to the worst natural disaster in recent memory for the state of Texas, Hurricane Harvey. Before and after Harvey made landfall, both EPA headquarters and Region 6 coordinated closely with the TCEQ and other state agencies to ensure all necessary fuel waiver requests were processed as expeditiously as possible. As a result of this cooperation, requests were usually granted in a matter of hours. Compare that to previous hurricanes where such waivers would be processed over several days because EPA took more of a wait-and-see approach. Similarly, EPA staff processed TCEQ's requests for no-action assurance letters concerning vapor controls at gasoline terminals, tank tightness of transport trucks, and landing of floating roofs on gasoline storage tanks. EPA's rapid response and close coordination with TCEQ in approving the fuel waivers and NAA letters helped ensure the flow of gasoline and diesel products throughout Texas and the United States. To be fair, the previous administration also worked well with TCEQ in transitioning all of the greenhouse gas permitting under the tailoring rule from the EPA to Texas. Recognizing the ability of a particular state to handle the application load under a certain rule is yet another great example of how cooperative federalism should work in a national regulatory scheme. I notice that I'm running out of time, so I will skip forward briefly. At the same time that we have cooperative federalism where it works, it sometimes doesn't work. Take, for example, the Clean Power Plan, which would have imposed significant economic and electric reliability strains on the state of Texas to attain emission reduction benchmarks in a very short time frame that the state has consistently maintained would be met anyway under existing market conditions. Specifically, Texas is currently on pace to nearly hit the initial emissions reduction benchmark of the Clean Power Plan several years ahead of schedule, and all without the rule being in place. Finally, I'm pleased to see that under this administration, a return to the historical norm of a SIP-oriented approach to the Clean Air Act enforcement and implementation. By diverting from a FIP-first approach, the EPA has enabled individual states to implement and enforce federal standards in a manner allowing for greater flexibility and efficiency. This in turn leads to both a greater diversity in problem-solving methods that are tailored to each state's natural environment, as well as more predictability and consistency in enforcement. I have examples of that, but I'll leave those for later. That concludes my testimony. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez.
Well, thank you, Chair Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, and other subcommittee members for inviting me to testify. I'm Matt Rodriguez, Secretary of the California Environmental Protection Agency, and I will describe how the federal-state partnership created by the Clean Air Act has provided an extraordinarily successful example of cooperative federalism. Since the Clean Air Act was comprehensively amended in 1970, emissions of the nation's most common air pollutants have fallen by an average of 70%, even as our economy grew by 246%. By 2020, the Act's economic benefits will total $2 trillion. The Act has spurred the use of clean technologies that drive business opportunity. New refinery equipment reduces waste and improves worker safety, and also improves the health of people in nearby neighborhoods. Idle reduction in electric vehicle technologies for cars, trucks, and school buses have cut fuel costs, engine wear, and greenhouse gas and smog emissions. Cooperative federal and state efforts have built this record of achievement. The federal government provides minimum standards and resources to states, and states tailor solutions for their individual communities. Unfortunately, today this relationship has been put in jeopardy. U.S. EPA, through a series of recent hasty and ill-conceived actions, is attempting to weaken landmark safeguards, with the result that states have been forced to spend resources to fill the gap. I'll provide several examples, and I've provided some more in my written remarks. In adopting the Clean Air Act, Congress gave California the option to develop its own emission standards and have other states adopt them as well, because California has technical expertise and experience that could drive innovation. Using this framework, 13 states, including California, automakers, and the federal government, have operated a coordinated national program to set rigorous and fair standards for greenhouse gases and fuel economy for cars and trucks. U.S. EPA's findings last year show this collaboration has been very successful. It is estimated that we'll save roughly 1.2 billion barrels of oil, cut greenhouse gas emissions by over 500 million metric tons, and save the average consumer thousands of dollars over the vehicle's life. Moreover, these standards have helped U.S. automakers stay competitive in the global market. So it's deeply disappointing that the administration recently announced its intention, without really meaningfully consulting with its partner states, to weaken and potentially dismantle this program. The result is huge uncertainty for industry and huge risks for the public. We're prepared to take action as necessary, including legal action, to protect this program and to restore the balance to this cooperative relationship. Similarly, the Clean Air Act gives U.S. EPA the authority, indeed the responsibility, to fight global warming and control greenhouse gases. Using this authority, the agency developed a Clean Power Plan through a transparent process to set attainable greenhouse gas reduction targets by 2030. The plan offers an array of state planning options to meet these targets, and with the plan in place, states were working collectively on implementation strategies. The Trump administration's proposal to repeal the Clean Power Plan threatens to curtail this progress and shirks its responsibility under the Act. Many states, including California, are stepping in with their own programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But without federal leadership, we lack a national vision to modernize our power sector and respond to climate change. Federal-state cooperation is also at the core of our national program to make sure our air meets basic standards to protect public health. Ordinarily, U.S. EPA sets science-based maximum levels for air pollution. The states then develop plans to meet and maintain these thresholds. These standards are critical because smog can trigger asthma attacks, worsen heart conditions, and damage agricultural production. The current EPA administration, however, has refused to designate areas in compliance or not in attainment with federal standards, instead announcing an extended delay before even starting this process. When 15 states and the District of Columbia filed suit over this illegal step, U.S. EPA withdrew this formal delay, but still did not do anything. We had to go to court again to require U.S. EPA to do its job. States rely on our federal partners to ensure that factories and power plants have strong pollution controls. However, just a few months ago, U.S. EPA revoked the once-in, always-in policy that ensures that major sources of toxic air pollution are always subject to strict controls. These toxic air pollutants include lead, mercury, and arsenic, which can cause cancer and damage the nervous system. Under the new policy, these pollution sources can drop out of the program and increase their emissions again. The states, again, will have to do their best to develop programs to clean the air and protect it, but it means diverting resources that could address other public health threats. Achieving the goal of clean air is about protecting our communities. We achieve this goal most effectively in partnerships with the public, with industry, and with the federal administration. A key to success is a strong and vigorous U.S. EPA. And this is why we appreciate Congress's resistance to proposed budget cuts to the agency and its core programs, including its grant programs. It's why we also appreciate the federal workers who have stayed with the program through this period of uncertainty. But this will not be enough if U.S. EPA continues to walk away from its responsibilities. If they do, the states will do what they must to protect the health of our people, our economies, and our environments. And we will use all our available tools to ensure that U.S. EPA is again there to work with us and not against us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Garvin.
Chairwoman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, Senator Carper, members of the subcommittee. My name is Sean Garvin, and I serve as Delaware Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to testify on cooperative federalism under the Clean Air Act state perspectives. In May of 2017, I had the opportunity to testify in front of this subcommittee on the importance and effectiveness of the Clean Air Act in protecting public health and welfare, preventing premature deaths, and protecting the environment. I'm pleased to be here today to once again address you on my state's perspective of the Clean Air Act and some of the serious challenges downwind states face in meeting attainment standards for air quality. Ozone-forming pollutants are well controlled in Delaware due to the state's proactively requiring cost-effective controls on a wide range of sources, including power plants, refinery, manufacturing plants, on-road vehicles, consumer products, paints and coatings, gas stations, and open burning activities, to name a few. Despite these efforts, Delaware continues to be challenged in ensuring healthy air to our citizens because we are a downwind state and subject to air pollution transport from facilities in other parts of the country. In fact, over 90% of the pollution that contributes to ozone in Delaware is transported from out-of-state sources. The answer to solving our ozone problems lies outside our borders, and we need the federal government to recognize the inequity that exists between upwind and downwind states. EPA has maintained that cooperative federalism is key to maintaining clean air. I would agree that cooperative federalism is invaluable when it works well, by empowering states to act under federal law and allowing communities to enjoy the benefits of state innovation. Positive outcomes can occur when the federal government works alongside states to determine best methods to continue progress towards clean air, provides the resources that states need to enforce the regulation, and steps in when a state fails to meet its obligation. Progress in downwind states, such as Delaware, require that the federal government continue to provide the states with the tools and resources needed to enforce the Clean Air Act. Yet there have been proposed massive cuts in the past two EPA budgets. Progress also requires that EPA maintain oversight and step in to ensure that upwind states continue to comply with the good neighbor provision. However, the EPA seems to be pulling back and turning decisions over to the states. We're also seeing the attempt to reduce regulations at the federal level, such as repeal and replace of the Clean Power Plan, weakening of the fuel efficiency standards, revocation of the California waiver, and the rollback of the glider truck rule. In addition, EPA has also failed to act on Section 126 petitions, which is one of the ways a state can address problems that lie outside its borders and seek reductions in emissions contributing to its non-attainment. All of these actions or non-actions will have serious consequences for downwind states such as Delaware. The inequity that Delaware faces is compounded by the fact that we are both a downwind and the lowest lying coastal state, and in fact, the lowest lying state. We are disproportionately economically affected by both the health care costs borne by the state due to health effects of poor air quality and by industry locating elsewhere due to lack of controls and regulations in upwind locations. As the lowest lying state, we'll be further impacted by pollution of inland states that are contributing to sea level rise and the increased frequency of storms and coastal erosion. My concern with the way EPA is approaching cooperative federalism under the Clean Air Act is they only focus on providing flexibility to decisions we make inside our states. The problem is that air pollution knows no boundaries, and I have no authority to ensure other states are addressing pollution that impacts my citizens. I count on the EPA to use their authority to hold all of us accountable to the law, regulations, and science to ensure we all are being good neighbors. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you all. And I will begin with my 5 minutes of questions. Mr. Altieri, you recently served as the president of the Association of Air Pollution Control Agencies, representing state clean air regulators from around the country. In fact, in that capacity, you sent a letter to me and to Ranking Member Whitehouse last year outlining the AAPCA's priorities for improving the Clean Air Act to improve coordination between the EPA and state regulators. So thank you for the letter, and I would like to seek unanimous consent to submit that letter for the record. So without objection, we will do that. A bit over a year into the administration, what do you perceive has changed with regards to the EPA's coordination with the states, and has it been more collaborative in your opinion?
Thank you, Chair. We've always had a strong working relationship with EPA, but this administration has been coming to states for that technical information as opposed to just imposing its will through federal implementation plans. So we have seen more technical, thorough discussion directly with our state.
Ms. Veer, would you have a comment on that? Have you seen a difference in the last year with working with a different administration on the EPA's coordination between the federal and the state?
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. Again, echoing Mr. Altieri, we had a working relationship with EPA prior, but since under this new administration, we found that working relationship has improved. EPA is listening to the state's concern and is interested in developing flexible solutions that fit Wyoming's unique characteristics.
Well, I would just like to say anecdotally, in my state in the previous administration for 8 years, we really asked the EPA to come to our state to have a listening session, which we were never able to get. But the EPA did come in several months ago, had a very vigorous listening session in Charleston, West Virginia, mostly around, obviously, coal. And we had all sides of the argument heard in public sector. It was very much welcome. So I think part of what I see cooperative federalism is the ability to listen, and that's what you've said as well. Commissioner Baker, you're from an energy state. You've mentioned that. The Clean Power, the Clean Air Act, obviously, you mentioned the Clean Power Plan. It was mentioned in some of the other testimonies that without the Clean Power Plan, we're not going to move forward with the desired capturing of carbon and cleaning the environment. Could you comment on that again? What Texas is doing is obviously one of the biggest, well, you said the biggest producer of carbon in the country.
Sure. So if you look at inside the Clean Power Plan, there were glide paths laid out that states had to meet to comply with the plan itself. I believe our first year was early in the 2020s sometime. We will be within 5% of that number by 2019, and that's without any plan currently in place.
What do you attribute that to?
Honestly, Chairman, a number of things. I think efficiency with our industrial sector, but I also would say, honestly, cheap natural gas has had a direct impact. We've had 12 coal-fired EGUs that are going to be retiring, have retired, or are retiring soon. So there is, so the market itself, I think, is driving us to do what the Clean Power Plan set out to do. And then you layer on top of that massive wind saturation into our power supply.
I'd like to ask just a very simple question of everybody. Actually, Senator Whitehouse got me thinking about this in his opening statement. He mentioned that states would want to walk away from the core mission of less pollution. So is that the desire, Ms. Veer, to walk away from the core mission of the Clean Air Act to mission of less pollution? Just yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Mr. Altieri?
No.
Mr. Baker?
No.
Mr. Rodriguez?
No.
Mr. Garvin?
Being downwind, I hope not.
Well, I wondered if somebody was going to take more than just a yes or no. So thank you, Mr. Garvin, for having faith and adding a few extra words there. On the sue and settle issue, you mentioned that. I think, who mentioned that? Mr. Altieri mentioned that. Could you explain to me how that works in terms of the ozone, the ground level ozone provisions?
Right. I think they have outcomes that are not consistent with the Clean Air Act. Currently, our utilities are being forced to add additional controls at an extreme cost, whereas those areas that maintain the standard on the East Coast, they don't have to provide any additional controls. So I think it's a negative outcome for our state and really unnecessary.
Anybody else have a comment on the sue and settle?
I'd like to make one comment. One of the more egregious sue and settle complaints that I think we would have goes back to 2010, 2011. It came out of a case over timing reviews for NSPS. And through that consent decree and that decision, EPA decided that new source performance standards were now going to be applicable to all oil and gas wells, whereas we had years and years and years of legal interpretation that said that NSPS did not apply. So with that one decision, essentially overnight, we went from, we had to regulate essentially, hundreds of thousands of new sources. And the problem with that is obviously the cost to do that, since we're a delegated state, falls onto my agency. Right. And trying to figure out how to go and do that through just a simple reinterpretation of the way the Clean Air Act had been interpreted since the amendments of the early 90s.
Thank you. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again to all the witnesses for being here. I'd like to open my question reading a quotation from Freddie Mac, the U.S. mortgage backer. And I quote them here. This is relating to harm to coastal housing and property markets. Quote, the economic losses and social disruption may happen gradually, but they are likely to be greater in total than those experienced in the housing crisis and Great Recession. Now, those of us who are from coastal states take warnings like that from our federal mortgage providers pretty damn seriously, as I think you would expect that we should. Could you tell me, Ms. Veer, what is the relationship between carbon dioxide emissions and sea level rise?
In terms of
cause and effect.
Cause and effect, I know that there are changes that are occurring in our environment currently that people are studying, and I'm not an expert in that area, so I would have to defer to the studies that others are doing in that area.
Mr. Altieri, can you do any better than that?
No, I'm not certain of the direct relationship between the CO2 emissions and sea level rise.
All righty. Well, you got a coast, Commissioner Baker. Maybe
Yes,
you
sir.
can do better. What do you know about this correlation?
In certain areas, I think there is a direct correlation. I would say in Texas,
What do you mean in certain areas?
So, for example, in Texas, the relative sea level rise that we're experiencing comes from really man-made things like subsidence, man-made structures that extend into the Gulf of Mexico, causing
I guess my
beach
question is,
accretion.
what is the role of carbon dioxide emissions in contributing to that sea level rise? If any, what is your understanding of that?
In Texas, I don't know what the science says specifically about that regarding our coastline.
How about generally, if not specifically? What is the science generally on the correlation between carbon dioxide emissions and sea level rise?
I think I answered that it's correlated.
Okay, there we go. To start, Mr. Rodriguez, California's coastal.
I'll just say I work with scientists all the time, and it's sometimes hard to get them to agree on certainty on anything. But in this particular area, the overwhelming consensus, and I have no doubt that there's a direct correlation between CO2 emissions and changes in the weather, including sea level rise.
And you have coastal communities that are actually having to plan for that, correct?
Absolutely. We just agreed to a new set of guidelines for development along our coast just recently at our Ocean Protection Council. We're preparing for sea level rise. We're already seeing it along our coasts.
Mr. Garvin, you're like me. You're coastal and you are downwind. Your friend, Mr. Rodriguez, is downwind of China. We're downwind of the coal plants in West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and so forth. And for a long time, we have been on the receiving end of their pollution and don't much appreciate the high smokestacks that have been built to make sure that that pollution goes out of their states and lands on ours. So take a stab at what sea level rise means for Delaware and whether it connects to the carbon emissions from these plants.
So I want to touch on two things, and I completely agree with my colleague from California. But when we look at this issue in Delaware, our two largest economic generators are tourism and agriculture. When you talk about climate change, part of it's sea level rise issues. Part of it is creating more frequency of storms and more severe storms and higher droughts and more flooding across the board. And they have direct impacts on our two largest economic engines in the state of Delaware. And we're seeing those impacts, particularly along our coastline
what do
now and have
communities in Delaware have to start doing now, given the sea level rise that is anticipated as a result of climate change and carbon emissions?
So there's three things going on right now. One is we continue to work on renourishment of our coastline to try to protect our coastline as much as possible. Our local communities are looking at land use decisions and existing structures on how they need to raise and address any new construction. And currently, as
treatment plants, ports, harbors, all those things need to be reconsidered?
Our wastewater treatment plants, our power plants. In addition, as we speak, our Department of Transportation is raising Route 1, which connects our coastline along the Atlantic coast by several inches to try to not to address the big storms, just to address the regular storms and the impacts that we're having on transportation, which also becomes a public safety issue for our communities along the coast.
Thank you, Chairman. My time has expired. I appreciate that.
Senator Markey.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Rodriguez, welcome. Scott Pruitt is now attacking the fuel economy standards, which were reached as in agreement with California and all the waiver states, along with the EPA and NHTSA in 2010, 2011. That would reduce our imports of oil by 3.5 million barrels of oil a day, which is roughly equivalent right now to what we import from OPEC on a daily basis. Seems like a pretty important thing to do, to keep on the books. And it also is still the largest single reduction that any country has ever put on the books to reduce greenhouse gases. That one decision. So it is huge. And I take a great deal of pride in it because I was the House author of that legislation in the same way Senator Feinstein, Senator Stevens were the Senate authors of that bill. That's a 2007 bill that was relied upon by DOT. So what do you think about Scott Pruitt's statement that the standards are too hard to meet, that it's just an unfair imposition on the auto industry? Do you agree with that?
No. We did a very, very thorough technical assessment of the standards and the progress that the auto industry has made in complying with those standards back in 2016 and 2017. Our Air Resources Board found that there was no reason to deviate from those standards. Progress was being made. And in fact, our experience has been if you set the right targets, industry will find a way to get there, and that seems to be the case here. So we see no reason to deviate from those standards that were agreed to previously with the federal administration.
Yeah, so what do you think about General Motors and Toyota and the other companies that are now saying they cannot meet the standards? What would your message to them be?
Well, we'll continue to work with them and talk to them about how do we meet these standards. We're always interested in hearing from industry. Frankly, they're not quite as dramatic.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Fox 10 News Now stream. We're just about 4 minutes to go till Fox 10 Extra, and then about an hour from our coverage with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg testifying in there in front of Congress. So we'll have it for you all in its entirety right here for you on News Now today. And welcome everyone here to News and Now, as we're taking just another beautiful look at our great state of Arizona. Welcome to News and Now, as we get you caught up on all the top headlines and stories of the day right here on News Now, and it's going to be a busy one. Ron Hoon is with me as always. Hi everybody, and how you doing, Ron?
Just doing great, Mike.
Great.
Doing great.
It is a big day when we're talking about what is going to be happening on Capitol Hill today with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg testifying.
Yeah, we got that. We've got, and we're a lot of speculation as to how he'll do. He did pay the courtesy calls to a number of senators yesterday, maybe to try to soften the blows.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
Yes,
I mean, he's in for a grilling, it's a little bit of a cliche, but boy, he definitely is. It'll just be interesting to see what he says they will do going forward. That's half of it, and frankly, the other half is just how does it look like he's handling it. If he stumbles and bumbles his way through, that's not going to be good.
No.
If he, steps right up to the plate and says, this is a real moment of truth for us, and we and those of us in the industry, blah, 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 have to prove our mettle in terms of protecting people's data. Isn't it interesting now when you go on to, what was it the other day? I went on to Apple for some reason, and right up front they said, here's how we share your data, or here's how we protect your privacy.
We're trying to get ahead of it.
I think basically every company coming out of Silicon Valley is trying to figure out, okay, well, where do we exactly go from here? And will we see some laws come out of it? I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions that we actually will maybe start to see some answers within about 48 hours from right now.
Right, and a lot of technology companies will be also watching this as well, because they want to see if there is going to be regulation down the road for a lot of these companies here. And I think this story really hit a lot of people just because so many people use Facebook.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at really the depth and the reach that this data goes, it's just really mind-boggling. And then, but you gotta wonder though, it is a free service. I mean, you're the product, really.
You are the product.
You really
That's
are.
exactly right.
Yeah.
There you go, Mike.
They got to market something.
Yes, exactly. So we got that going on. We have the president canceling his trip to South America.
That was huge. That was huge.
And he even said, it's because I want to be here to monitor what's about to happen in Syria. So if anybody had any doubts that there's going to be some sort of response pretty soon regarding this chemical attack in Syria, you can put those doubts to rest. It looks like, particularly when you consider the president was so critical of Barack Obama's presidency for creating a, quote, red line and then doing nothing about it and punting it to Congress. President Trump can't afford to appear to be weak. I don't think we're talking about like a full-on ground war or anything like that, but I mean, we got those fighter planes stationed right off the coast in the Mediterranean. It is dicey because Russia is so heavily involved there, and you got the Iranians. I mean, so there's a lot to consider there, but by the end of the day, we may be sitting on a real big story when it comes to that as well.
Right, yeah, and it was interesting to see what Senator John McCain said the other day, too, about President Trump's comments on withdrawing from Syria last week. Yeah. He says that might have really egged this whole thing on.
Yeah, that it sort of gave carte blanche to Bashar Assad if we sent the message that, hey, we're getting out of the region. And so, yeah, I mean, that's pretty harsh criticism right there, to say basically that some of the things the president said may have actually played a role in what happened next. It's interesting because I saw a commentator say the other day that he really, I'm trying to think who it was, does not think that the United States end game is the removal of Bashar Assad from power in Syria, because we've already seen what happens when you create a power vacuum in that part of the world. ISIS tries to get in there and tries to take over. You know, and so nobody wants that kind of a situation. So who knows? I mean, it's just so complex, and there's so much of a potential for missteps. We shall see. In the meantime, then you get this huge headline yesterday that the FBI raided the offices. It's still a huge story today of Michael Cohen. As one of the comments I saw online today said, well, this proves that it doesn't, because for the most part, the White House has continually said, and a number of lawyers working for the president, we're cooperating, we are cooperating, and so if this is then the end result, it's going to put a chill on the whole level of future cooperation between the White House and the Mueller team. Judge Andrew Napolitano was on Fox News Channel this morning saying he thinks it's quite possible that what's really going on here is he is trying to put the squeeze on Cohen to try to get information, that the real goal is to try to get information on the president. And, you know, for his part, the president's out there saying, I've told you from day one there's no Russia collusion. And so people look at it now and they see, well, so they're starting to go down the Stormy Daniels road?
Oh, yeah, right.
When the whole launch of the investigation was to, A, see if there was, and how deep did it go, any collusion with the Russians in the election, and what do we have to do to protect our election system going forward from those kind of future attacks.
Right.
So, and then in the end, it turns out that they're going to go after the Stormy Daniels part of the story. It feels like apples and oranges. So it'll be fascinating to see how this all plays out.
Do you think, Ron, that we're getting closer to a possible Mueller firing?
I think so,
I mean,
yes.
It just seems like because of the rant yesterday that President Trump had at the White House.
Yeah.
They had about 6 minutes of it that they gave it to us. Yeah. And boy, was he was lit up yesterday.
He was lit up. And it's also interesting that a commentator that you occasionally, you know, who's socially very liberal, commentator on Fox News Channel named Alan Dershowitz, famous East Coast attorney, has probably been on television more prominently than just about any attorney over the last 20 plus years. He called out the ACLU saying, where are the civil libertarians here stepping up to defend attorney-client privilege? And he said, I'm just telling you, if the shoe was on the other foot and this was happening to Hillary Clinton and to some of her lawyers, there'd be outrage from multiple media outlets.
Right.
And we're not seeing very much of that. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know exactly where all of this is headed, but it sure knocked the stuffing out of the stock market yesterday, which is sort of an interesting way to go to see kind of instantaneous reaction when news breaks. If it's important enough, it actually affects the stock market. Yeah, right. And that's what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, we saw it really. I mean, it had a really great day, and then did it dwindle down. It still stayed in the green, but not what it should have been, though.
Although then it's fascinating. Overnight, you had this speech given by the president of China, talking about how, okay, we will do more in terms of opening up our markets to auto sales, etc. A lot of people have criticized the president since the day he took office for tweeting. And we're in the social media age.
Yes.
I mean, we're live not just here on Fox 10 Extra, which is cable channel 9. We're also live on YouTube.
Right.
Anytime we want, we pop over to the YouTube comment box, and that's what social media is all about. It's way more interactive, way more, you know, just immediate feedback from people, that kind of thing. And so when you see how social media kind of impacts, you know, the whole political atmosphere that we live in.
Yeah.
When President Trump yesterday went on to social media and said, this is despite all the criticism of people who say, get off Twitter, Mr. President, which he's not going to do.
No.
I thought that was one of the most effective tweets he'd ever sent out during his presidency. When he said, look, when U.S. car companies are trying to sell cars into China and they put a 25% tax on our cars, and then you turn it around the other way, China wants to sell cars into the U.S. and we put a 2% tax. He said, that's not fair trade, that's stupid trade.
That was big. That was big.
You know, and honestly, I mean, it just puts it in terms that people can truly understand.
Right.
And whether that played any additional role, who knows? But then you get this speech from China, from the Chinese leader there, who says, okay, we will open up our markets more to car makers, et cetera. The proof is in the pudding.
Yes.
But so far, the market seems to like it. At one point, it was actually up 500 points.
Right, right. So we'll continue to check on that. But another big story is the Arizona National Guard heading to the border. And we have our very own Steve Kraft. He is on his way to the border, and we actually have him live right now here on News Now. Steve, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. How's it going?
Good. How about you? So what can you...
fine, thank you.
So what can you tell us here? You're just starting out.
That's right. We're just starting out, and what you're seeing is what we're seeing looking through the windshield here. And we're heading down I-10. We're headed towards Tucson. We're trying to find places where the Arizona National Guard's people who were deployed yesterday and today are going to be providing support services for the U.S. Border Patrol. This was announced yesterday by Governor Ducey to great fanfare. We covered that yesterday. He was surrounded by National Guardsmen and women from Arizona. And this is something that President Trump has encouraged and called for, and Governor Ducey supports. And the idea was originally that there was a caravan of migrants who were illegally attempting or going to attempt to enter the United States, and that this is a threat. And so therefore the National Guard should be called up in border areas like Texas, where they're already up, and here in Arizona, where they're just leaving today, to provide support services so more National Guards people can be helping out and Border Patrol people can be freed up, so there's more boots on the ground, as the governor said, on the border, guarding against this influx of illegal entrants. What's happened is that the migrants have largely apparently disbanded outside Mexico City. Nevertheless, the National Guard is helping out the Border Patrol against a perceived threat, but it's unclear what, if any, threat there may be, and all this comes against the backdrop of a decades-long low of attempted crossings of the border, this according to the Trump administration itself. So the border is more secure than ever, more heavily guarded than ever. Nevertheless, the National Guard is called up, and so I've been on the phone with the Guard today trying to determine where they are helping out the Border Patrol, and so far we haven't gotten any specific answers as to where, if anywhere, they are. So we decided to take the initiative, head down to the Tucson sector, and that's near Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. And we're just going to go in there and ask the Border Patrol, where is the National Guard helping you guys out? And can we go to those places and show folks at home how the National Guard is taking part in this mission? And so that's where it is right now. We're heading down to Tucson, and we're hopeful of going somewhere where the Guards members are going to be arriving. And that's how it is. I'm struck by the fact that we haven't gotten any specific destinations from the Border Patrol or from the National Guard. We asked yesterday and also this morning, and the most specific information we're getting is they will be somewhere in the Tucson and or Yuma Border Patrol sectors. Yeah. That covers pretty much the entire 389-mile border between Arizona and Mexico.
Okay.
So
good luck.
Hope to find them.
Right. Good luck finding them. So you got the where question, Steve. It's Ron here. Then you've also got the what. Yeah. What exactly will they be doing? I mean, do we have any idea? We're talking about support services, but that sounds pretty generic. Have we been able to hone in and actually learn more specifics on what they're going to be expected to do?
Well, Hooner, the Guard has been very specific about saying that under American law and our constitutional traditions, the National Guard cannot take a warlike stance within our own country enforcing our laws, and they're very careful about that. Yep. So it's the Border Patrol's job to be patrolling the border, and the idea is to get more of those folks actually walking on the border and doing their thing. And so the Guard is going to be doing some of the back office types of things, you know, and you're right, we're trying to pin down exactly what kind of support services we're talking about. Are they building observation towers? Are they doing some desk jobs so that Border Patrol agents can get away from the desk and go down to the border and to the areas where people could be crossing if they were to cross? How far away from the border physically would the guards people be? Would they be setting up camp somewhere? And, you know, I don't know. I don't know the answer to those questions. I don't know if they'll be driving trucks back and forth to help out the Border Patrol folks so that they can be patrolling more. But that's the mission. And this is not a new thing. You know, Presidents Obama and George W. Bush also called up National Guard to provide background support services away from the border, which they did. Thousands of guards people were called up under both of those administrations. And that was during a time when a lot more people were trying to cross over the border, and it was perceived as a real threat. And they did those jobs. Now we're in a situation of historic low numbers of people trying to cross, but the president has called for the National Guard to be mobilized and to be deployed and to help out. And we are unclear as to where these folks are going to be headed and how they're going to be helping out. And we certainly hope to get some answers over the course of the day so that we can share them with everyone who's watching. And I think it's an important story, and the whole country's paying attention to the border right now, and it's a big issue always. And the governor yesterday, said it was a very important priority for him as well. So we do want some specifics because we did cover the big announcement yesterday, and so now it's like trying to put meat on the bones, so to speak.
Okay. All right, Steve, great reporting, and we'll see what you come up with by 5 o'clock.
All right. Thank you so much there, Steve, and safe travels down there to the border.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you, and thanks again to our very own Steve Kraft, who will be really embedded there if he could find them and see what that mission will entail there. So we'll keep an eye and try to talk with him a little bit later there as well. But that's really the top stories here of the day here on News Now. A lot of moving parts today, and in about an hour, expecting the Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg there. So we'll continue to watch that. And Ron, thanks so much for the top headlines there of the day. When we come back here, we'll see if any lawmakers are going to be talking ahead of the big testimony coming up in just a moment. And welcome back, everybody, here to News Now, as we're just showing you just another beautiful shot Of our great state of Arizona on this Tuesday. Hi, everybody. Mike Page here, continuing on with the news now. Thanks so much for joining us today as we give you the top stories from across the country and right here in Arizona there as well. And there was just some big news that happened last night in Scottsdale when a small plane crashed, killing all 6 people on board. Our very own Marcy Jones has been covering that story all morning long. Here is the update.
That's right, Troy. Well, since we last checked in with you, not too many updates, but Scottsdale Police is making it very clear that any new information will be coming directly from NTSB, not from their department. Out here live, you can see that they have some people from the course, from that Champions course out here, redirecting people who are trying to walk through there. It's still blocked off for the investigation. What we know so far, however, is that the Piper PA-24 Comanche took off from Scottsdale Airport last night around 9, which is just a short distance away from the TPC. And just moments into their flight, that plane went down on the golf course. Several 911 phone calls came in from people that witnessed the crash. The plane crashed on the south side of the course near the canal, which backs up to Frank Lloyd Wright Boulevard. Now, the plane quickly burst into flames. That fire, however, was contained very quickly from fire crews out here. But Scottsdale Police saying they confirmed that there were 6 people on board on that aircraft and not a single one of them survived, unfortunately. Good news here, however, is that nobody on the ground was hurt. Here's what they had to say.
They work on the accident investigation part of it. We also, as Scottsdale PD, will also do an investigation. So jointly, or simultaneously, we do that, but we hold the scene until they move in. Obviously, they're in the business of determining why and how aircraft crash.
At this time, the names of the victims have not been released. It's also not clear where the flight was headed at that time, but we do know that it was taking off from Scottsdale Airport again, and this all happened around 9. Now, we just spoke to a man who's from Chicago. He said he's been a pilot for 40 years. He's very familiar with the Scottsdale Airport, and he says all the times that he's flown in and out, that it's very clear to everybody who's flying that the airport closes at 9. He said he was thinking maybe that they could have been rushed. However, nothing has been confirmed. That was just his opinion. Of any time that we get more information, of course, we'll bring that to you. But that's the latest. Troy.
All right. Thank you there so much, Marcy, for that update. And just another tragedy that happened yesterday as well, Lake Pleasant, where it looks like a father drowned at Lake Pleasant. The search still continues. Our very own Carmen Blackwell with that story.
Developing this morning, search crews are expected to head out here to Scorpion Bay, Lake Pleasant later on this morning to continue a search for a 51-year-old man who they believe possibly drowned yesterday. He was actually out on the water with his 32-year-old daughter, and they believe that the man possibly went overboard, and the daughter tried to hold him up, but she was not successful. So the man went under. People that were watching nearby saw this all happening and rushed over to try to help the daughter out of the water, and they were able to do so, but they could not find the man. They believe that he is still under the water, so they will be heading out here to Scorpion Bay later on this morning to try to recover his remains that they believe are still underwater. But for now, that's the latest details that we have. The tide is picking up, the wind is as well, so hopefully there will be some good news later on this morning. But for now, that's the latest. Troy, back to you.
All right. Thank you there so much, Carmen, for that update. That was a little bit earlier today on AZAM. Well, here is the latest story with the border battle. We just heard from our very own Steve Kraft moments ago when it comes to the Arizona National Guard making its way to the border there.
So yesterday, you probably saw the news, more than 225 National Guard troops were deployed to the Arizona-Mexico border.
Another 100 being deployed today. Fox's William Lajeunesse is at the Army National Guard Armory here in Phoenix with more on the deployment of these troops.
Good to see you, Will.
Hey, Troy, Andrea, I'll tell you what, there's definitely urgency from the president and the governors, but I don't want to overstate reality here. The word deployment does not mean arrival. A lot of this takes time. For instance, let's take the pilots and the crews of the Blackhawks that you see behind me that could be going to the border. They've got, number one, they got medical, they got dental, there's paperwork, there's processing. Most of them have employers. They have to let them know, how long they're going to be gone. There's logistics, where they're going to live, how they're going to eat. Then you have probably the most important factor, which is trying to match their skill set to what the Border Patrol needs, and that's going to determine where they're going to go. Tucson, Yuma, Lukeville, Ajo, Naco, those things are still literally being worked out in the buildings that you see behind me. So Governor Ducey said over the next several weeks he'll dedicate 350 guard, 1,000 from Texas, and 250 we're told from New Mexico. Troy and Andrea?
Okay, so we established when we talked to you, I believe it was last week, that they're not going to be able to go down there and apprehend people because basically they can't enforce laws. So what exactly are they going to be doing down there?
Good question. So you're right. The two things we probably won't see is making arrests or seizing drugs. Some, we're told at least in Texas, and I don't know about Governor Ducey specifically, but some in Texas will be armed, most will not. In my experience was with the two other call-ups, you'll generally have maybe 15 or 20 guardsmen working, and you'll have 2 of them with guns just in case for defensive purposes. But number one, helicopters and drones. Everyone needs air support. Not only patrolling the border and recon, assisting agents, obviously in apprehending individuals, but then you get a sensor hit a few miles away. That helicopter that CBP has is dedicated over here. Now you're going to have a guard helicopter can go check that sensor hit out. Is it a cattle or is it people? If so, then you have the Blackhawks where you can literally drop people into the mountains and canyons to help make an apprehension. That's a capability for the most part right now they don't have. Number two, vehicle maintenance. I mean the Border Patrol's got thousands of vehicles, and maybe they only have a number of people to keep a few working on the same time. You have improving the roads, grading the roads. As you guys know, you need speed to go get people. You see them, but before they go over the wall or the fence, whatever, and then into the hills or into town, you only have a short window to apprehend them. So you need good roads to get there quickly, 50, 60 miles an hour. That really helps. And then finally, of course, you've got the surveillance. Border Patrol's got a lot of cameras, a lot of radars. You have these video feeds coming into these headquarters where you've got literally 100 monitors that you're looking at as those cameras are sweeping the border. So now guardsmen who are very experienced in this stuff can watch those things and then direct the agents in to make the apprehension. Those, I believe, are the 3 major areas that you're going to be seeing guardsmen take over duties of the current Border Patrol.
And with the hopes of freeing up the Border Patrol agents so that they are able to actually do their job in apprehending some of these individuals.
Sure.
Okay, real quick though, you mentioned logistics.
That's the idea.
Yeah, you mentioned logistics, and we don't really know how long they're going to be needed down there, right? We don't really have a timeline.
I think the president said 18 months. Yesterday, Governor Abbott in Texas said we're in for the long haul. So if that's the case, we're going to need other states to step up and dedicate individuals as well. We know California so far has said no. Oregon has said no. I think Montana has said no. South Carolina, I believe, has said yes. So there's I think we're going to be seeing other guardsmen from other states come to the border states to help out. Now, the president, as you said, was somewhat imprecise, saying, well, until I get the wall up. Well, Congress has only given them enough money for another 100 miles to fill some of those gaps. So the truth is, as you said, I don't think we really know how long it could take. Back to you.
If the president really decides to push it in California, is it legal for him to say federalize some National Guard troops and to send them down there, or does he have to have California's permission?
Troy, actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I put out an email to someone at CBP this morning to get an answer on that. My recollection from what I've heard is, yes, he has the authority to do that, but he most likely won't. In lieu of that, what would happen is you'd have freeing up of agents in Arizona. You'd send some Border Patrol who's currently here over there. And that happens a lot. You know, when the RGV, when the Rio Grande Valley popped a few years ago, there was a massive redeployment of Border Patrol to that area to try to stem the tide there. So if you have a movement of traffic from Arizona and Texas because of National Guard enforcement, and you see greater number of immigrants trying to come in California, my belief, well, I know that the Border Patrol will react with that, with Border Patrol manpower to go there if they can't put National Guard there. But I don't know the definitive answer to your question.
Okay. Yeah, but great information, William. You're
really
always
great.
so educated on all the topics you cover. So really appreciate you spending some time with us this morning.
Thank you.
All right, so that was a little bit earlier today on AZAM with that discussion on the border battle. And then also this morning there had to be a rescue on North Mountain for a hiker. Take a look at this. Sky Fox capturing it all.
It's a Sky Fox over North Mountain Park Trail where Phoenix firefighters are helping a man who fell while hiking. Troy Barrett over it in Sky Fox. What do you know about this, Troy?
Yeah, the firefighters went up and got the person who hurt themselves on the North Mountain Trail here. Wasn't too far from the parking lot. They are now down and about to transfer this person from the big wheel onto a gurney so they can get him into an ambulance and take him off for some medical treatment. It looked like there was a leg injury, either an ankle or a knee. They had to help that person up into the big wheel with a couple of firefighters. It wasn't exactly super easy to get him in there, but they did get him in, and a quick trip down the mountain. Again, it wasn't too far from the parking lot where they had to hike up and retrieve this person who had hurt themselves this morning.
That big wheel is basically like a gurney that's on a big wheel so that you can, get that down the trail. It's a big fat tire that lets you go over some rocks and things like that, and it really does help firefighters get you down without having to bring in a helicopter or something like that. And I don't see any obvious signs of trauma to him, but you can get in trouble, Troy, pretty easily on these trails. I mean, one little false move and, snap an ankle, blow a knee out.
Yeah, pretty easily for sure. Some of the rocks that are on the trail, it can easily kind of give way and twist an ankle or knee, as you mentioned. This particular big wheel that the firefighters are using this morning, not that sort of typical large ATV-looking wheel that we see most often, say, over on Camelback. This was more like an extra fat mountain bike tire that they put on this particular big wheel setup this morning. So that was pretty interesting, and it didn't take firefighters long to get to him and get him up there, get him in the big wheel and then down to where they are right now.
Yeah, he seems to be favoring that left leg there a little bit. It looks to be an older gentleman there, and hopefully he's okay as they transfer him over.
Yes, and hoping for the very best for that hiker there. Well, more news now coming up next here. We are just about 45 minutes away from Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg testifying live. And you'll have it right here on News Now.
Kroger is hiring for thousands of jobs. The company is looking to hire 11,000 employees for its supermarkets, including Fred Meyer and Mariano's Fresh Market. 2,000 jobs will be in management. Starting this month, the federal government began mailing new Medicare cards to the 59 million participants. But now AARP is warning seniors not to fall for any Medicare scams. Medicare wants enrollees to know there is no activation process or fee, and that Medicare will never call you and ask you to verify information over the phone. And Necco, the maker of those Valentine's Day conversation hearts, says it will close its doors next month unless it finds a buyer. Necco is the oldest operational candy maker in the U.S. Necco wafers predate the Civil War. That's business. For more, log on to foxbusiness.com. In New York, I'm Tracy Carrasco.
No, say it isn't so. Not the little heart candies. No, hopefully they get some kind of buyer there. All right, live right here at the Dow Jones. We are in the green right now as the market's really soaring today, up 443 points. It's not session highs, though. It was up to about 515 points for a high today. We'll see if it could get back there. Right here live on News and Now. I'm your host, Mike Page. Welcome to News and Now, everybody. It's going to be very interesting, too, when Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is testifying to look at the Facebook stock to see what it'll be doing during his testimony. So we'll keep an eye on that for you as well right here on News Now. Speaking of Facebook, here is the very latest what we can expect today. Here's Doug Luzader with the latest.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is clearly out of his element here on Capitol Hill, and he is in for a long day today. He's been trying to soften the ground around here, but he is going to face a barrage of questions from senators about how his company operates. Suit and tie. Mark Zuckerberg may need a new profile pic. No hoodie, no jeans, trying to look the part on Capitol Hill as he made the rounds with private one-on-one meetings with select senators. He didn't talk publicly, but they did.
When he said to me very forthrightly, we were lied to, and we should have caught that. I believe that, but I think in today's world, that's naive.
But I think it's important for him to take it head on and get out and be his own spokesperson.
Zuckerberg will try to explain to a large joint committee hearing today exactly how millions of his users' data wound up in the hands of a consulting firm, Cambridge Analytica, which had ties to the Trump campaign. In his prepared remarks, he's expected to say, "We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. It was my mistake, and I'm sorry. I started Facebook, I run it, and I'm responsible for what happens here." Congress may be anxious to regulate social media companies in general, and Zuckerberg wants to have a hand in how those rules are written. But he and his company are in the crosshairs in what has become something of a clash of cultures. Just listen to the new White House chief economic advisor.
Is he going to behave like an adult as a major corporate leader, or give me this phony baloney? What is it, hoodies and dungarees, and what is that kind of signal cell?
No dungarees today. Zuckerberg says that the company is making some changes in the way it handles data, changes that could ultimately affect their bottom line. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
Thanks there so much, Doug, and we'll keep an eye on as we are getting closer. About 40 minutes to go. We are getting the shots right now inside the Senate Judicial Committee, where we will be hearing from Mark Zuckerberg and the senators here today. So we have multiple shots, multiple angles here for you. That is coming up here within the next 40 minutes right here on News Now. We'll have it for you. And we all are also learning some more details on that devastating bus crash in Canada that killed 15 people.
A tragic mix-up in identifying victims of the fatal bus crash in Canada.
Xavier LaBelle, who had previously been confirmed deceased, is not deceased. He is alive. And unfortunately, that means that Parker Tolman has been confirmed to be deceased.
Canadian officials confirmed the body of Parker Tobin was mistaken for that of another player, Xavier LaBelle, but it's unclear how the error happened. Officials explained most of the Broncos players look alike.
They had the blonde hair that was supportive of their team for their playoff run. They're very similar builds. They're all very similar ages, and they're very athletic.
Health officials later were able to correctly identify LaBelle and had to break the news to two heartbroken families. Officials have assured the small community of Humboldt all the victims have now been correctly identified. The news comes days after a semi-truck slammed into a bus carrying the hockey players on their way to a playoff game. 15 people died and 14 others were injured. The Office of the Chief Coroner apologized for the misidentification.
All I can do is offer our sincerest apologies, our sincerest condolences and sympathies.
The cause of the accident is still not clear, but an investigation is underway. In New York, Chris DeMeo, Fox News.
Thanks so much there, Chris. Well, yesterday, big news coming not really late last night, but late on the East Coast when President Trump learned that his personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, his office was raided by the FBI. Take a look at this story.
It's a disgraceful situation. It's a total witch hunt.
President Trump angered that the FBI is targeting his longtime personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. Federal agents raiding Cohen's office, home, even hotel room, seizing records related to a $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels, a porn actress who claims to have had an affair with then private citizen Donald Trump more than a decade ago.
I said that is really now in a whole new level of unfairness.
The raid partly prompted by a referral from special counsel Robert Mueller to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Mueller is investigating potential ties between Moscow and the Trump campaign. Monday's action once again also raising questions over whether or not the president will sit for an interview with the Mueller team or if he'll even terminate the special counsel altogether.
If he acts aggressively and fires Mueller, I think he's going to magnify the dangers for himself and his presidency.
President Trump also going after frequent target Jeff Sessions, essentially blaming him for the current state of the investigation.
He should have certainly let us know if he was going to recuse himself, and we would have put a different attorney general in.
Since removing himself from the Russia probe, the duty to oversee the special counsel now falls to his deputy. That would be Rod Rosenstein, who continues to insist he has complete confidence in Robert Mueller. At the White House, I'm Kevin Cork, Fox News.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, a community in Florida is on edge as pit bulls in the neighborhood are really terrorizing people that live there. Take a look at this story.
It's horrible.
A neighborhood in fear and fed up after cops say these two pit bulls have been terrorizing their Daytona Beach community off of Seneca Boulevard.
Everyone around here is sick of it. Like, everyone loves animals, but you need to control your animals.
Daytona Beach police say the latest incident happened on Sunday when the two pit bulls bit 3 people here at Tuscaloosa Park. Witnesses called 911.
911, where's your emergency?
I'm at Tuscaloosa Park. There's a couple of dogs out here that are on the loose, and they bit a person.
One man was taken to the hospital with bites to his arms and legs.
Based on what I heard in the 911 call, he was bleeding pretty badly at one point.
Animal Control took custody of the dogs, which are now under a 10-day quarantine at Halifax Humane Society. Investigators say just 2 months ago, the dogs' owners were cited when the pit bulls cornered a man in his truck.
They did not bite him, but they were very aggressive towards him, and then they just took off again. So we've had dealings with the owners of these dogs more than once.
The owners didn't answer the door. Maddie Petty says her disabled grandma was almost attacked by the dogs when she was walking her own dog.
The only reason my grandma didn't get attacked by them is because she was walking with her cane that night, and she used that to get them away from them.
All right, and that is your top stories and headlines of the day, and we are just now 30 minutes away from Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg testifying in front of Congress. This is the live shot that we are getting right now, and we will have it for you in full right here on News Now. And welcome back here to News Now as we take a live look at Camelback Mountain there in the distance on this Tuesday. Hi everybody, Mike Page here. Welcome to News Now as we are covering feeds from all over the country. And remember, when breaking news does occur, you know we have you covered right here on News Now. Really the big story of the day. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg just moments away from testifying in front of a Congress. This is really going to be a two-day event. First day today is part of a Senate committee, and then tomorrow the House committee gets a shot at him as well. Here's a couple of feeds that we have coming in for you right now. This is a stakeout camera, just in case if any senators want to talk right before they are about to do the testimony. They will have that for you, and we'll bring that to you if any senators jump up to that podium. And then we have the different shots available to us inside the Senate Judiciary Committee room, where we will be just moments away from CEO Mark Zuckerberg getting to that area to testify. So we'll have that all for you on fox10phoenix.com, and of course right here on Fox 10 Extra as well. So we'll continue to monitor those feeds here for you. I want to take you out to New York, though, where earlier this morning Supreme Court Justice Ruth Ginsburg did a ceremony for some people, for about 200 citizens that became U.S. citizens today. Take a look at this.
My fellow Americans, it is my great privilege to welcome you to citizenship in the democracy that is the USA. Today, you join more than 20 million current citizens who were born in other lands, who chose, as you have, to make the United States of America their home. We are a nation made strong by people like you, people who have traveled long distances, overcome great obstacles, and made tremendous sacrifices, all to provide a better life for themselves and their families. My own father arrived in this land at age 13 with no fortune and speaking no English. My mother was born 4 months after her parents, with several children in tow, came by ship to Ellis Island. My father and grandparents reached, as you do, for the American dream. As testament to our nation's promise, the daughter and granddaughter of these immigrants sits on the highest court in the land and will proudly administer the oath of citizenship to you. You have studied our system of government, and you know of its twin pillars. First, our government has limited power. It can exercise only the authority expressly given to it by the Constitution. And second, citizens of this country enjoy certain fundamental rights. Those rights are our nation's hallmark and pride. They are set forth in the Bill of Rights and other amendments to the Constitution. They are inalienable, yielding to no government decree. And our Constitution opens with the words, "We the people of the United States." By limiting government, specifying rights, and empowering the people, the founders of the USA proclaimed that the heart of America would be its citizens, not its rulers. After the words, "We the people of the United States," the Constitution sets out the aspiration to form a more perfect union. At the start, it is true, the Union was very much in need of perfection. The original Constitution permitted slavery and severely limited who counted among we the people. When the nation was new, only white property-owning men had the right to vote, the most basic right of citizenship. But over the course of our history, people left out at the start, people held in human bondage, Native Americans, and women, 50% of the population, came to be embraced as full citizens. A French observer of early America, Alexis de Tocqueville, wrote that the greatness of America lies not in being more enlightened than other nations, but rather in her ability to repair her faults. Through amendments to our Constitution and court decisions applying those amendments, we abolished slavery, prohibited racial discrimination, and made men and women people of equal citizenship stature. In the vanguard of those perfections were citizens just like you, of every race and creed, making ever more vibrant our national motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. We have made huge progress, but the work of perfection is scarcely done. Many stains remain. In this rich land, nearly a quarter of our children live in deep poverty. Nearly half of our citizens do not vote. And we still struggle to achieve greater understanding and appreciation of each other across racial, religious, and socioeconomic lines. Yet we strive to realize the ideal to become a more perfect union. As new, well-informed citizens, you will play a vital part in that endeavor by first and foremost voting in elections, serving on juries, and engaging in civic discourse. We sing of America, sweet land of liberty. Newcomers to our shores, people like you, came here from the earliest days of our nation to today, seeking liberty, freedom from oppression, freedom from want, freedom to be you and me. I would like to convey to you, finally, how a great American jurist, Judge Learned Hand, understood the word liberty. He explained in 1944 what liberty meant to him when he greeted a large assemblage of new Americans gathered in Central Park to swear allegiance to the United States. These are Judge Hand's words. Just what is this sacred liberty that must lie in the hearts of men and women? It is not the ruthless, unbridled will. It is not freedom to do as one likes. I cannot define the spirit of liberty. I can only tell you my own faith. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which is not too sure it is right. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which seeks to understand the minds of other men and women. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which weighs their interests alongside its own without bias. May the spirit of liberty, as Judge Hand explained, be your beacon. May you have the conscience and the courage to act in accord with that high ideal as you play your part in helping to achieve a more perfect union. And now, will you rise for the oath of citizenship?
Raise your right hand.
And please repeat after me. I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state or sovereignty, of whom or of which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen, that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by law, that I will perform non-combatant service in the armed forces of the United States when required by the law, that I will perform work of national importance under civilian direction when required by the law, and that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God.
And that was Justice Ruth Ginsburg from earlier today. And when we come back here on News Now, everybody, we will have full coverage for you of CEO Mark Zuckerberg testifying in front of the Senate committee amid data and privacy concerns for the social media giant. We'll have that for you coming up next on News Now.